Well, hello, freedom seekers. We're here for a live episode again, one more time. It's been 25 weeks since I started this process, and I'm likely to go for a couple years because, I'm reporting to you about my transition, and I want to help you with your transition. And many of you maybe then transitioning your life in your area of your sex life. For me, I did that 13 years ago, and now I'm really, it's what I call it. The first step wasn't liberation. It was just transitioning, opening my marriage so that I could enjoy having this kind of sex life that I desired to have. And like many people, they first become sex positive. And that just means that, I'm perfectly okay with consensual acts of sex, whatever you want to do and someone else wants to do, and everybody's consenting, and that's all good. But it doesn't really liberate you. And as I examined my own life and my journey, not just in the last 13 years living my non-monogamous life, but what I really have gone through in the process of growing my life to be able to be the place where I am today, where I just love the life that I live. And I found that a lot of that had to do with living a liberated life, and because in so many areas, there's not much liberation to it. When you think of relationships, when I got involved in got married, it took away my liberation. It reduced and really it just eliminated my ability to maybe choose to have sex with someone else. And so instead of becoming liberated, we go in the opposite direction. We really then create dependencies and in our life. And I find that in our health, it's certainly the direction then that I headed with my health. Instead of living that liberated, healthy life where I'm liberated and don't need to worry about having to be close to the doctors and hospitals and all that. I remember my grandparents, when I was a little boy, my grandparents would talk about retirement and the dreams they had for retirement, because they're both blue collar workers, and they dreamed of being able to retire one day and live where they wanted to live, which wasn't where they did live. And they lived where they lived because that's where the job was. But, when they finally retired, they kept living where they had lived all their life. The reason for that, they said, was because where they want to live is just not close enough to the hospitals and the doctors. And so they created a life that was not liberated as they got older. And so that happens to so many of us. Instead of our health, maintain our health and our wellness, that we become dependent. We don't liberate our lives. And the same thing with our work and wealth. And so after I became non-monogamous in my life 13 years ago, then I started really enjoying my non-monogamous life and my sex life, with being able to enjoy multiple relationships and multiple encounters with women and sexually. And I continue to enjoy that today. But I found that, when I liberated, or when I started having sex with other people, that there was a lot more to it, because I started to create my own complications with my wife and I, with the rules that we set in place for our sexual requirements. They were really to protect her insecurities, and and that's was not liberating. It wasn't liberating not only to me, it wasn't really fair to the women whom I got in relationship with, and that we had all these rules that then they had to follow as well. And that's where I started to really focus on, instead of just focusing on living a non-monogamous life, but instead living a liberated life. And that's when I started to realize that there's a different energy about living a life that is sexually liberated. And that's where I really started to grow. Once I started to learn and live a sexually liberated life, then I started to grow as a person. And so that's where then in my journey and my channel and the things that I talk about here, I really point in the direction of creating what I call an elf life. That's an easy, liberated, and fun life. You don't want to create a life where you're suddenly able to have sex with multiple people, but it's just not as much fun because it's not easy. And there's all these rules and various factors that, you go home to my wife, and I have to make sure then that I'm all showered, because then, I'd had sex with someone else, and that's yucky stuff. And so, like, as if I'm going to go home and be dirty, and so I really then, when I started developing new relationships, I started to realize that I wanted to have more liberation. And even though I was living a life where I was having sex with multiple women, it really wasn't as freeing as I wanted it to be. And so I started reading and learning from other people about how sexual liberation can really change your life. And so I decided I wanted to move in the direction of living a sexually liberated life. And I started to do that, I'd say probably about 5 years ago. And that's when just tremendous growth took place in my life. The more growth probably in the last 5 years of my life than in the previous 40 years combined. And so now, of course, I feel like my life is, I'm living the sexually liberated life that I desire. And I'm now looking at the other areas, because then I also liberated my health. And that my health certainly was not headed in the healthy direction. And it wasn't headed in the direction that was going to help me to enjoy my sex life as I got older. It was going to limit and restrict my sex life as I got older. And so I started to turn my health around, and it became where then I don't make choices as to, what I'm going to have to do with regards to doctors and stuff, because I really just don't need to see the doctor very often. I go in every year to 2 years for a checkup, and that's it. Usually it's about every 2 years. And the checkup, the doctor does all the stuff, and yeah, you're doing good. And I watched and learned how to take care of my own health. And that was the liberating process for me with my health, is learning how to take care of my health. And I'm not going to go into that in this video, but what I want to really come to here is just this idea of living a life that is really liberated and free. And whether it be your sex life, or for me right now, the thing I'm working on is liberating my financial life. Because then I found out that is what was the area that was limiting me from really living the life that I want the most. And I think that is true for many of the people who've watched my videos. But work first on your sex life. And then what I found anyway is then that gave me a real drive, a real desire and a want to work on my financial life. And so you certainly develop your liberation in your sex life first. And so then I want to talk tonight about values. And last week I gave an assignment. In that assignment, I said to spend 3 times 20-minute sessions, 3 20-minute sessions throughout the week, and develop a list of values. What I said is, ask yourself, what's important to me? And really spend time contemplating that question. What are the things that are important to me? What has been important to me in the past? What's going to be important to me in the future in developing and creating the life I want? And so, for instance, with me, one of the things that is much more important to me now is an internet connection than what it used to be. And because then as I work to create my life digitally, then I need to be able to take and connect through the internet. And that is going to be one of the things that I then have to take and make sure that I have some access to, at least once or twice a week, that have a good, strong internet connection, and preferably even more. But for instance, if I'm hiking through India somewhere, I may go a week or 2 weeks. If I'm bicycling across Europe, I may go a couple of weeks without an internet connection. And that's the life that I'm creating for myself, is to give me the ability to do those kinds of things. And so for you, it starts with creating the sex life of your dreams. And going back 2 weeks ago, talked about developing a list of what could you do to move forward in creating the sex life of your dreams. What could you do? And I talked about going back to when I transitioned from monogamy to non-monogamy and opened my marriage. And I realized I came to a juncture place where this is before I ever had any conversations with my wife. But I had to first come to a place in my life where I had to be asking myself, well, what could I do? Well, I could do nothing. That was an option. I could remain unhappy and miserable the rest of my life. I could commit suicide and just decide to just end my life. People do that. I could decide to poison my wife. People do that too. So there's all kinds of different things that I said I could do. And so the process there, and that's what we discussed 2 weeks ago. If you go back to the video that I made 2 weeks ago, and the process there is really to allow yourself to think in terms of possibilities, because we become so narrow in our thinking that we lose all creativity. And when you lose the creativity, you don't give yourself options. And the more options that you can think about, then somewhere in those options are going to be the real solution that's going to work for you. And what I've found, I've coached many people, even back starting when I was going through my own transition, that a lot of people were online because I was very transparent and very open about things that I was going through in online. Back in those days, it was Yahoo groups. And so being transparent as I was, people were emailing me and they were getting in conversations with me and asking me, because they're sometimes as a man, sometimes as a woman, but they were in similar type situation where they didn't want to feel stuck in a life of monogamy anymore. And another thing then could cheat on my wife, And so there's all kinds of different things that we talk about what we can or what we could do. But then that's where the values come into play. And that was then the homework assignment that I gave you last week, is to spend 3 sessions of 20 minutes each and listing out what's important to you in your life. So for instance, then for me, one of the things really important is total and complete honesty. What that meant then is that, yes, I could cheat on my wife, but if I did that, then that was going to be going against my value. Now, and then one of the other things that was part of last week's assignment is in brainstorming, coming up with 50 to 100 different values that you list out. And after you've done that, then take and create a list of your top 20 values. And you'll find that those are the values, and your top 20 values, those are the values that you really want to frame your life around. But then sometimes you have to also ask, well, why is that a value? And is that consistent with the life that I want? So, for instance, then going back to when I was in this time of transition, I valued honesty. And it's like I wanted to have sex. There was going to be good sex with a woman or 2 women or 10 women or 20 women. The number didn't matter. I didn't really put a number to it, but I just wanted to have good sex. So it didn't matter how many women it took to have good sex. And so in wanting to do that, though, I had to come to grips with my religious past. And that I had valued, one and only relationships and monogamy. And I had valued my having a lifetime relationship where you only have sex with that one person in your life. But as for many people find, that didn't work out so good. And I think a lot of people find that. And I even had someone contact me here yesterday that, things are good right now in his relationship. And so he's willing to be monogamous. But the thing is, when people are starting to, they're in a relationship with a woman, and this happens to be a guy, but this could happen with a woman in the same situation as well, or that they're having a really good time in the relationship. The sex is good, and so it's like, yeah, I can see doing monogamy. Maybe right now you can. But you have no idea what's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And so often, then I have people that end up having conversations with me that, yeah, they've gone down that road 5 years, 10 years. One gentleman, 25 years, and found that sex is just not exciting anymore. And he wants to have it be exciting again. I know I've had women this year, several women that wanted to have sex with Kat and I. They're bisexual women, and Kat's bisexual, but they're cheating on their husband. And so this is where values comes into play. And so for me, cheating on my wife just was not something that worked in my life, because I valued honesty and I valued trust. Those things were important to me, ethics, and cheating just didn't feel good to me. And that's why then when we coined our relationship term of ECNM, it's ethical and consensual non-monogamy. It's not just ethical non-monogamy, because then ethical non-monogamy is what one person might think and be able to slide under the carpet as being, well, yeah, I'm ethical. They figured as long as they're not raping or something, they're being ethical. But that's where the consensual, the idea of consent is where then all parties that you're in a sexual relationship with have knowledge and consent to that sexual encounter. And that doesn't mean like with me and Kat, or even me and Chris for that matter, that doesn't mean that I have to go and before I'm going to have sex with a woman, that I have to say, hey, can I have sex with this person? For instance, I'm here in Ventura right now, and if I wanted to have sex with someone, I'm not going to tell that woman, well, I'm sorry, but I've got to get a hold of my partner in Seattle, Chris, and let her know and find out and make sure that there's consent with everybody. No, we just have an understanding where she knows that I live a non-monogamous life. And so our agreement is more around terms of safe sex guidelines. And that's where it used to be, and this is the difference between living a sexually liberated life and living a life that was sexual and non-monogamous, but not that liberated. And that is that yeah, I my partners know that I'm non-monogamous, and they consent I have their consent, for them to understanding that I'm going to be my non-monogamous self and live my non-monogamous life. And I don't need to go and ask them for their permission because we don't own each other. And that's part of my liberated non-monogamous life, is that, there's no ownership involved. And so we don't own each other, but yet we know that we have our health to be a factor here. And so I certainly don't want to do anything like right now with COVID going on. I don't want to do anything that is going to be bringing that COVID virus into my life. And the thing is with that, then you don't even know about it for some time after you get it, and you're out there infecting other people. And that's exactly how STIs work as well. One of the differences, most STIs these days are not really a major big deal. And you can pretty easy to avoid the ones that are a big deal. And so those that aren't such a big deal, it's like a matter of, okay, I'm going to have to take this pill for a week, and then that'll clear up. And so with the COVID virus, though, it's a different matter, because it's a matter of life and death, and it's a matter of life and death. Like, I've got a friend that 3 weeks ago got out of the hospital, and he had hip surgery where he had both hips replaced, and he's in his 70s, and if I wanted to go over and check in on him, see how he's doing. Now, I know that he's what I call COVID safe, that he is not going to give me the COVID virus. However, I want to make sure that I'm not going to give him the COVID virus, because he's had some health challenges over the last couple of years. And to be honest with you, I'd be afraid that if I had COVID and didn't know it and went over and visited with him, and he ended up catching COVID, he could die from it. And so for me, I would feel like I did that. And that's not something I want to do. And so when it comes to consent, then people have to be making sure that they're looking out for everybody else's health. And then this is part where the values come in so important to me. And now when I'm talking with people, I'm asking them, and I'm really kind of testing them and checking them out for their values, because if they don't have a value of a high level of truthfulness and transparency and honesty, then how do I know that they're going to be COVID safe? You see, and like if there was someone, some gal that I met, and I wanted to have sex with her, and want to find out if she's COVID safe. And so this is where then I learned through communication with people to be able to talk about these things ahead of time, and to be able to take and develop an assessment of risk. And that's because the values that I have are my health. My health is one of the highest values. I mean, health and honesty are probably the two highest values that I have besides sex. Sex is a third value, but sex is not more important than health. Honesty is probably on the same level as health, because when I'm then having these conversations with people, how do I really know if I can't trust their honesty to believe anything that they're telling me about their COVID safety or their safe sex practices and their safe sex knowledge and understanding? And that I have conversations with people about all of this stuff. And so it's important to understand and try to get a grip on your own values. And then also when you start to venture into having a non-monogamous life, then you start to be able to have conversations with people and find out if they have the same set of values that you have in many cases. Like, do they value honesty as much as you? And yeah, you sometimes get in conversations with them about non-sexual subject matters, and find out, what is their honesty in other areas like? Because, and that's, to me, that's another thing that I value personally, is I value congruency. And a congruency means that somebody is going to be consistent in applying the values in their life. They're not going to take and have one way of doing some things over here and another way over here to do things in their life. That kind of inconsistency, it makes me nervous. And then makes me feel like then I'm not sure I can trust these people. But that goes back to the video that we made about 3 weeks ago. In fact, I did a series on building trust. And when you yourself become someone that is a very trusting person and somebody who can be trusted, then you're putting out an energy. And in putting that energy out, you then start to attract that kind of people. And this is one of the things that I talk about when in my coaching practice, where I talk about we all are born with a magnetic energy. It's our magnetism. We're all born with it. But then what happens, and that magnetic energy is designed to pull us to the things and the people and the opportunities in our life that is going to make our life great and wonderful to live. And that magnetic energy is designed to push away from us the things, the people, and the opportunities that just are going to take away from our satisfaction and pleasure that we have. And so it's that magnetic energy, though, that so often when you're the killer of your magnetism is conformity. And most of us, when we're in our growing up years, we have learned to live a pretty traditional life where we're conforming to what other people want. And it's not always things that serve our lives very well. And so we totally lose and kill, crush. We hide away and bury away our magnetism, because the magnetic energy, your magnetism, is what makes you a unique human being. And those magnetic energetic waves, they go out. Imagine, as you walk around, that these energetic waves that you can't see are just beaming from you like you were a radio tower. And they're going out, and those waves are tuning in to other individuals and other things and opportunities that are out there that are either being pulled to you or being pushed away from you, just like a magnet. And so when you have your values and are consistent with how you apply your values, and for me, going back to things that I could have done to open up my marriage and or to have the kind of sex that I wanted to have. So many of those things on the could list very quickly got scratched off. And I knew that no, I could not do that because it wasn't consistent with my values. And I didn't want to then put out this beam of energy to be attracting people to me and pulling people into my life that weren't the caliber and the kind of people that I really it may be fun to have sex with someone that is, really sexy and hot but boy, if they're just not a good match for you personally with your values, and that person goes against your values, the sex isn't worth it. It really isn't. There's a lot of wonderful people to have sex with. They're going to be great sex. And it's just not worth it to have sex with someone where you are then going to be compromising your values. And so that's where we find too that people that are out there as people who cheat, then they'll have sex with other people that are cheaters. But for me, going back to this idea of being safe for COVID and safe for STDs, if they're going to be dishonest and deceptive and deceitful in order to be able to have what they want and cheat on their relationship, how can I trust that they're going to be honest and reliable with me? And telling me all that I need to know to make sure that I'm not going to get the COVID virus from them, or I'm not going to get an STI from them. And so this is where your values come. They're important that you develop then this level of consistency in your values so that they are consistent with the kind of life that you want to live and the kind of people that you want to bring into your life. It's not just about having sex. There's a lot more involved with this. And so your values, go through, you got your list, your top 20. That's another thing I wanted to just chat about, is that if you find, and if you didn't do those exercises, then certainly tonight's video, you can just go ahead and turn it off right now and either go back and watch the other videos, or, the information I have here is not going to be really of any use for you. You're just wasting your time, and I certainly don't want to waste your time. But so if you find when you do that exercise, either from 2 weeks ago where you're then doing 3 20-minute brainstorming sessions with yourself about what could you do to create the sex life of your dreams, or last week then about what's important to you, what's really important to you, and developing that list so you have your top 20 values. And then it's those values, then you take a look at those values and then ask yourself, are these values consistent with the life that I want to have and live the most? And so for me, part of the transition process in my life, when it came to moving from monogamy to non-monogamy, I had to, it's what I now call reframe. I had to reframe some things in my thoughts, in that my thinking had always been because of my religious past. And so my thinking was all wrapped up in what's wrong and what's right about sex. And I had to do some real reframing and so that my values were going to fit the life that I wanted to live. My values, for instance, of honesty, certainly that was fit with the life I wanted to live. But values of you shouldn't have sex if you're not married, it took me a while to reframe my thinking process about that. I was a virgin when I got married. My wife was a virgin when she married me. And so, that was just so ingrained into our thought processes. And so we had to make sure that there was this congruency in our life that took us from the life that we want to create, where we're going, not where we're at right now, but where we're going. And we had to change some values along the way. And that's where the reframing came about. Maybe you are cheating, lying to your wife, and being dishonest, doing things of that nature, or your husband. And so you want to live an ethical and consensual non-monogamous life. One of the things that I coach people on is that create that ethical life first. And that means you want to sit down and you want to figure out what your values are and live your values. Don't say I value honesty and live something else. You see, that was like when I started the transition to a healthy life. It worked exactly the same way, in that I had to sit down and look at what I valued. And at that time, I valued riding my motorcycle. I valued hanging out with the guys on their motorcycles. I valued sitting around watching TV. My wife and I watched quite a lot of TV. And because you see, your values have to be a reflection of your time. And so I found that when I wanted to live a healthy life, I had to change some values then. And the things that I had to change from where I was to get where I wanted to go is I had to, for instance, value active life, living an active life. And that meant, like Kat and I went out for a 2.5 mile walk earlier today. And so that means that I felt like having a cup of a latte at Starbucks. And so I go onto my app, and order it on the app. And then I walk over. It's a little over a mile and almost 1.5 miles to get there. So round trip is not quite 3 miles. And yeah, we could have jumped in the car. Could have easily done that. Could have rode our bicycles. Could have easily done that. But for short trips, I really enjoy walking because it helps me to get fresh air and just helps me to get out. Not where I'm in the car, but I'm actually just out and enjoying the sun coming down on me. I mean, this is Ventura, California. I talked to my girlfriend, Chris, in Seattle after I got done with my walk. And, and she it's 20 degrees colder in Seattle than it is here in Ventura. And not only that, it's been wet and rainy. And so, it's like I'm here in Ventura and I'm going to really take advantage of enjoying. I can't do that being inside every day, all day. And so that's another value of mine is fresh air and the outdoors. I highly value the outdoors. And value of mine became for living a healthy life to be more active, go hiking, do a lot more hiking and walking and bicycling. But that all fits into the value of having an active life. And of course, then that means that also I look for partners that I'm going to be having an ongoing sexual relationship with, I like to be able to do things with them outside of sex as well. And so I like to be able to have partners that like to do things like going hiking, and partners that like to do things like going bicycle riding. And yes, we like to have dinners and things like that as well. But it helps to understand what your values are and then be tuned into your values. Most people, you see, most people go throughout their day by day, because they're just trying to live and get through life. But that's not what I want to help you to do, because living and getting through life, that's what got you where you're at now, in a life where sexually is not your dream. And so you're wanting to transition that in order to open up and have something that's more beautiful than what you have now. And so your values become important to you in knowing and understanding not only who you are, and then how you're going to help to how you can make that transition. You know, me transitioning my income into a ongoing passive income, there's a lot of things that I've had to address there with my values as well. You know, what kinds of things am I wanting to create, and what am I willing to do? And I see people in the arena of digital marketing where I'm working at now, that it's just like they're chasing the dollar forever. And that's something that is not a value of mine at all. I wanted to develop financial liberation, not financial dependence, where the more you make, the more dependent you are on making more. That's not the kind of life that I want. And so your values then have to be consistent. And as you develop what we did 2 weeks ago, develop your list of coulds. Then you have your list of your top 20 values, and you take a look at the two and find out what doesn't work. And you can easily throw out a bunch of coulds. Nope, can't do that. You know, it's not consistent with my values. Can't do that. And then you find those coulds that are consistent with your values. Or then also you start looking at your values and saying, well, wait a minute. Is that the value that's going to make my life work for where I want to go? So, for instance, for me, like making this video here with you tonight, to be honest with you, I was a little tired after I got back from my walk and then chatting with Chris and having my dinner. Would have been very nice to sit down and watch a movie. I think that Kat's sitting down and with her daughter watching a movie in the living room right now. It would have been nice to do that. But I know where I'm going with my life, and I know what I want to do in getting there. And one of those things that's very important to me is to have the consistency of coming here and chat with you every week on Monday evenings. And so that's something that I value very highly. But that was a change that I had to make. And that was a change from, just putting up YouTube videos when I wanted to, but to actually come here and do this live stream every Monday night consistently, that was a change that I had to make. And it was because of what I wanted to accomplish was not consistent with the things that I valued at the time, because your values reflect in how you spend your time. And that's another thing then you take a look at is there congruency with that or incongruency? Wherever you find any incongruency, there are adjustments that need to be made. And so I really bring to all this to you at this time in November specifically, because I want you to start to really think about where you're headed next year. And so that as you go into December, you can be kind of laying the groundwork so that when January 1st, or right after January 1st, I think the 2nd or 3rd is the first Monday of January. But when January 2nd or 3rd comes along, that you have a good solid foundation and you're ready to create a life for next year, that at the end of next year, 12 months from now, you're going to be able to say to yourself, I have just had a great year. I've accomplished some wonderful things, because there's consistency in your values. There's consistency in the plan that you put together for yourself. Because with that list of coulds, once you take and throw out the ones that really are can'ts, okay, or won'ts, and then you look at your values and you also adjust your values if there's any adjustments that need to be made in those values. And then you bring the two together, and what you'll find is where the plan that's going to work for you in your life to move you from where you're at now in your sex life to where you want to be. The steps and the plan lies in that list of the coulds and how it matches with your values. And if you align those things up, you'll be able to take from those coulds, you'll be able to find a couple of those little coulds that are in there and say, well, wait a minute, maybe this would work. And how could I get this to work then? And then you make a list that this is what I can do. And that's what you end up with. You take your coulds, line it consistently with the values that you have after you fine-tune those values, to make sure that you know that you don't need to change any of those values or develop some new values or choose some new values. And that's one of the things with change. When you see things as in terms of change in your subconscious mind, there's been a lot of research done on this. In your subconscious mind doesn't like change. And so if there's something you're trying to change, you're going to get resistance from yourself. It comes from your subconscious mind, because your subconscious mind is designed to protect you, and protect you means to keep things the same. And so what we've learned is you don't want to try to change your life. You simply want to choose different options. But you've got to give yourself those options that are different in order to choose them. And that's why then it's important to make sure that those options that you choose are consistent with the values, or they're the values that are going to help you to get where you want to go. And if I valued watching movies all the time, then I wouldn't have time to do the things necessarily that I need to do to develop the income that I want to make. If I valued playing golf, I wouldn't necessarily have the time to do the things I need to do to make the income that I want to make. And so for me, liberating my income becomes a very high value and becomes very important. And as that takes place, then I look at my list. What can I do? I had a list. I started out with my coulds. It's where I started out. What could I do? And then I've narrowed it down to what can I do? And then I found the key things that I can do. And I was able to create a step-by-step plan in order to get where I want to go. And it's all congruent with my values. And so then you're able to just get into this, what I call a state of flow, where you're just really flowing from where you're at now. And every day you're in the raft on the river, and you're just flowing along. Sometimes there's obstacles that come along the way. Sometimes you just need a break, and so you go on over to the shore and you get out of the raft and just take a little bit of a break. Maybe you need some lunch, But then you get back in the raft and you continue on down, and you know, some days there's some rapids that you run into, and it's scary. And it makes you want to just turn around and go back to the smoother water, you know, and it makes you want to just quit some days because it gets scary. Because you're doing your new territory. But yet you know that at the end of flowing gently, or not so gently, but rather roughly, all the combination that's going to be there for you, because it's all going to happen. But at the end of the river is the life that you want. And you just got to get into this state of flow. And how you get into that state of flow is by making sure that your values are going to be the values you need to get you where you want to go. Make sure the values are consistent with then your list. You start out with your coulds and you narrowed it down to your cans. And then from your cans, you create a step-by-step program for yourself to be able to get from where you're at now to where you want to be. And your values stay consistent with that. Because as I mentioned, then a lot of this, your magnetic energy allows you to take and start pulling into your life the things that are going to serve your life and make your life work, and it'll push away from you the things that won't make your life work. And so real quick, then I want to wrap this up and go over here to my weekly report like I do every week, and report on my week last week. And so let me just real quick then flip over here and share my screen. Okay, and so yes, we start every week. This is our video report card, and where we are transitioning and thriving in living an ethical and consensual non-monogamous life that you create and love the most. And that's a life where you have more sex with more people more often. Excuse me. And I talk about creating a magnetic elf life. That's easy, liberated, and fun life. And that gives you more satisfaction, more pleasure. And that then becomes the test that every day, keep this in your mind every day, is asking yourself, did the things that I did today, did it increase the satisfaction and pleasure in my life? Or were there things that I did today that took away from the satisfaction and pleasure in my life? And those things that take away from the satisfaction and pleasure, you want to learn. With your magnetic energy. I realize for many people it's been covered up, and and this whole idea of trying to live a traditional life that you had to conform to everything, that killed that magnetic energy, or at least covered it up, and you're now having to unbury it and bring it back to life and resurrect it a little bit, because that's one of the things in creating a magnetic elf life. We want to help you to resurrect that magnetic energy. So it's drawing to you the things that you want and pushing away from you the things that aren't serving you. And one of the tests here for that is this increasing your satisfaction and pleasure in your life, or is it taking away from the satisfaction and pleasure in your life? Now, if it's taken away from the satisfaction and pleasure, why do you want it in your life anyway? It's not serving your life. Now, every once in a while, we have to do things that for the short term that takes away from the satisfaction and pleasure that we have in the short term in order to give us more satisfaction and pleasure down the road. And so I understand that as well. And that's really another subject that's called sacrifice, because that was something I knew very well in my past life, that I sacrifice a lot. And oftentimes all the sacrifice that you think you're making to be able to have more satisfaction and pleasure, it's not going to work that way for you. But again, that's subject for another video. And so let's go ahead and move on here. Talked about the homework assignment for the last 2 weeks, but the top one here that I have, that's for this week. And that is, I want to go ahead and ask you to spend 3 20-minute brainstorming sessions this week where in each of those sessions, let's each have a separate session every day for 3 days. If you end up having to do 2 in one day, make sure there's 4 or 5 hours in between the 2 sessions so that you're really opening up the creativity in your mind. And so with this week's assignment, though, then I want you to be able to have these 3 separate brainstorming sessions on what would you like your life to look like 12 months from now in the way of sex and relationships. That'd be one of your sessions. Another sessions, what would you like to have your life look like 12 months from now in the way of meaningful work and wealth? Another session, what would you like to have your life look like in your health and wellness? And so write those down and have those brainstorming sessions this week, because there again, that's where you're going to use your values and go back and look at what I've taught you here to do now. You create that list of coulds and then take your values to eliminate what from that list of coulds. But it's so important to allow yourself to just imagine the ridiculous coulds, because that's where you start to open up the possibilities in your creative mind. If you don't allow your mind to get creative, then you are creating limitations and restrictions. And so that's why we do this list of coulds and make it just all the ridiculous things on it, plus all the things that aren't ridiculous, but list them all out. And so let me go on to my report then, my report card. And we're going to get right down here to the 3 goals that I had last week. First goal was to spend 2 hours, 5 days a week, getting my bookkeeping done. I give myself a pass for that. Spend 2 hours, 5 days a week, getting my computer shut down. I give myself a pass for that. And actually this week, I probably accomplished those. I'll wrap those up. But really a good week last week, making good progress and headway. Get my ebook formatted was the 3rd one. And I give myself a fail on that one. And I give myself a fail because I had some people review my ebook and give me feedback on it. You know, and a lot of times when you ask them to do something like this, they're very complimentary and very kind and very nice. And I always appreciate that, but I really want to what I try to do is I tune into any criticism that somebody wants to bring, because that's oftentimes where I find the truth that I need to hear to make something better, whether it be something about my life, or in this case, the ebook that I wrote. And so people gave me some feedback, and I looked at that and I said, oh yeah, I really need to kind of revamp my ebook a little bit, and so that I really am focused more on my audience. My ebook focused more on me, not so much my audience. And so that then kind of made it so that I'm now going back and redoing and doing a major edit on my ebook. And so I hope to have that accomplished and finished this week. So then I'll continue working from there about getting it formatted, because then I certainly don't want to go ahead and be formatting something that I'm not going to put out there into the printing and publishing. And so that's where then brings me to my 3 goals this week. And the 3 goals this week are going to be the same as the ones I had last week. Only this week, I really expect that by spending the time getting my bookkeeping done this week, that it may not be quite enough time yet to finish that. I may have to go another week. We'll see. But spend 2 hours a day, 5 days a week getting my bookkeeping done. And then spending 2 hours a day, 5 days a week getting my computer shut down. And explain what that meant last week, so I'm not going to go through that today. But and so this week I think I'll be able to complete that process and actually be able to get my computer shut down this week, and I'm very excited about that. And I keep getting these alerts and notices, that there's updates of my software needs to be done, and I keep then telling it, give me another week, And so I know my computer really does need to be shut down. And so anyway, hopefully when I come back and see you next week, I'll be able to tell you that that's a job accomplished. And then working on getting my ebook formatted. That'll be the last goal that I have for this week. And now the last thing I want to mention is save that date. I've mentioned before, on November 27th, because on November 27th, my partner Kat and I are going to do a webinar, and we'll hopefully by next week, I'll have the page where you can register for it all set up for you. But we're going to be doing a webinar where even if you can't make it then, if you register for it, we'll send you the recording of it. But what we're going to do is we're going to take and spend about 60 to 90 minutes with you and helping you to get some concepts and some ideas about how to create a life going into next year so that you can live a life that's going to be easy and liberated and fun. It's the elf life, how to really create that elf life. And we'll go into some things that kind of take off from even deeper than the things that I've been going through here for the last 3 weeks on the videos on Monday night here. And so I hope that you'll take and join us on November 27th. And by next week, I should have that registration page up. So come back for my video next week, and there'll be a link down in the description so you can see and get registered for that free training. So that'll be it for tonight then. And I'll take a look to see if there's anybody that has made any comments or questions. And that's what I always do when finishing up, just to make sure that anybody in the audience has a question, then I address it. But we're in good shape tonight. And so thank you for joining me, and we'll see you again next week.